unless you really take a conscious moment to like look back, which is what I think this episode is going to be a really good reminder of for both of us, you don't really acknowledge like how far you've come.
So I'm with Andy Milligan. Andy, tell me about your background. Tell me about your agency. Tell me about your experience with graphic design and marketing.
Yeah. So, um, first of all, I want to thank you for having me on today. Looking forward to like a really good catch up and chat. But yeah. So I founded MMG Design full time. I founded it in 2022, just more of as a freelance hobbyist for marketing and graphic design. Um, but then went full time, kind of as we contexted a little bit on after the layoff on February 1st of last year. And after that, it's been full time expanding. So whenever that happened, a lot of it was joining Chamber of Commerce's, and a lot of first time founders can kind of relate to it. Is that when you first start, you very much over index on the self marketing, self promoting side, and because it comes to a realization where you're like, okay, I have to let people know what I do, and I have to start generating some kind of momentum towards making this a career. And then it's so hard, especially when it's your first time, when you're not a business, you're so removed, especially for people in creative and design. They don't view themselves. This is the biggest thing that I see in a lot of young designers is that they don't view themselves as business owners. They don't view themselves as solving like businesses problems. They just view themselves as kind of more task takers and creatives. And so that was the biggest, honestly, circle that I had to square in the first several months is like, okay, this is kind of what I have to do now if I want to make this the lifestyle that I want and make it support everything that I need in terms of finances and just getting fulfillment out of it is transitioning the purely creative aspect of it to like generating, generating like actual results for businesses. And there's a lot that goes into that, but over the past year, it's been a lot of refining what I do. So mostly we've honed in on web design with a combination of ongoing like content marketing. So a lot of our clients are in B2B. So they're recurring engagements with 5 to 6 like really good clients. And then we do a lot of website management, design, adding updates, and then doing content mostly on LinkedIn. Stuff with the business is now, but in terms of the future, there's a lot of opportunities and I like full transparency. I am like a first time business owner and I'm not that far removed from our last conversation ourselves. So I'm sure we'll have another talk here another year where I hear this one and I'm like, man, like that kid had no idea what he was saying, just like I did with the last one. But yeah, it's a slow evolution of these things, but as to where the chapter sits currently, that's where we're at.
Well, one of the pillars that the Punk Rock Art School and the Punk Rock Art School podcast that I want to stick to is helping artists through these times. And one of the things is that I actually the reason why I came up with this name was because I didn't go to school to learn what I learned. I literally just became an artist straight out of high school and just went for it. I didn't ask for any permission, started sign painting, started doing everything. There was no social media. There was no like phones. Photoshop was new at the time. So what I learned was that I believe that you're college educated, correct?
hmm
What did you go to college for?
Cool. Yeah, this is where it starts to fall apart, Michael.
That's
Um,
okay.
so I went for strength and conditioning. So I was a personal trainer growing up. I was very much in the same. Not I wasn't a personal trainer growing up, but I had aspirations to be like a strength and fitness coach. Just because I was always sort of training and working out. And actually, to take a step further back from that, my first year of college, I played golf. So I went to Methodist University for a degree called PGM, which is professional golf management, because I
Wow.
thought I wanted to be a golf fitness instructor. Long story short, I did that for a year. I knew that was not for me. Then I transitioned to back to Ohio, University of Findlay, transitioned to more of a general sports nutrition background. Then finished that out because I was like, okay, I'm not going to change majors twice. But actually, while I was there, you talk about being college educated, the biggest part of the biggest value out of my college experience was the networking, not the networking in a traditional sense, but just what it exposed me to because it got me involved with. I'm not sure if we touched about this last time, but it got me involved with the student-led marketing group called the Oiler 10 at Finley. And what they do is it's basically just a group of students that are athletes. That's why it's called the Oiler 10 because it was founded by originally 10 athletes. And we just got together every Wednesday, 5:30 in the morning, and we would work and we basically just build our own like fractional marketing team, and we would work with local businesses in exchange for donations to the university because we couldn't be for profit. So we worked that semester. My last 2 semesters of college, I got to do a rebrand for a local brewery, and that's just like that got me into everything. And then that led to an internship after that, where I did design and marketing for another company in North Carolina, sort of back down south. And then from there, I just expanded to that's where I realized that I wanted to do this for the rest of my life. And even as I'm saying that, I haven't really taken the time to think like just how differently things could have gone according to plan. But I think like in any aspect of creativity, we kind of have like these little rabbit holes, right? Like one thing it leads to another, whether I know like a lot of young creatives, they might start with a logo design, or maybe their foot on the door was like a really cool animation project, or they use Illustrator or After Effects. Then it's like, oh, like I built this logo, now I want to animate it. So then they get into After Effects, or it's like, oh, now like how does this look on a website? So they get into to web design, you know. So that's kind of the positive and negative, I think, of what we do is that there are so many adjacent things. So the positive is that you can learn so much, right? Like there's this huge, vast expanse, and it's really hard to not get like the shiny object syndrome of just bouncing around from thing to thing and risk becoming, too much of a generalist. But on the upside, it's like you can either you have the option to be more of a generalist, which isn't always a bad thing, and be the sole provider for companies or businesses, or just that's part of the fulfillment is just getting good at all these things. Or you can just go like really deep on one tool. Like there's specifically logo designers. We had James Barnard on the podcast like a long time ago, but he just he's like, I really enjoy doing the logo designs. And he's built an entire business around the process of refining that. So we had different packages. And then you have people that like are more like me, where we do, onboarding and strategy, which is less the creative aspect. But we're really focused on just the website and the ongoing marketing. So you kind of have to kill the part of yourself that wants to do everything. Um, but also acknowledge that that's part of what, makes you exceptional. It's what makes you creative. So not leaning into that a little bit, but not to a detriment. I know that was like a total tangent from the original question you asked, but that's kind of like where like unpacking from our last conversation to where we are now and where it's taking me. So
Well, that's great, and I think that in that is a perfect example of you as a creative now, like, there's no genesis, there's no path to this. It's, we've all come from different, places. I knew people that were in finances that have come into this, and they have a different way of thinking, people that are copywriters are just as valuable to my creativity as like an animator, so there's a lot of different avenues that creativeness can take. And I think that that's one of the things that I definitely want to instill in these discussions is we're all trying to figure it out, right? And especially with design, especially with anything creative, like something that's there one day may not be there the next day, and these different platforms are changing, and how people can make money on it is really the clients come in and they just want to make money. They like to be creative too. I know that, but ultimately it's all about making money. How do they make money? How do they get in front of people? How do they sell their products, sell their services? And so what inspired you to not actually be at a desk under a boss and be your own creative agency? That's a big leap, especially at your age.
yeah, I mean, and two, like sort of branching on with the last thing you said there that I want to skip over too fast because it was a really good point. Um, was that you like there is no one right way to do these things, you know? So I think the biggest thing you'll learn, no one has it all put together. So like the first thing you'll learn is that in our heads, we all have sort of this general underlying conception. Like maybe when you see someone, maybe you really look up to them, maybe you just have a really high opinion of them. But on some level, you just have it in your head that like they have it all figured out. Like there's nothing behind the scenes that, makes them imperfect. And this is, I think it just comes from like sort of the celebrity syndrome that we fall under sometimes, which is just natural. But the first thing, like the first thing that you are, if you start doing this, for yourself, or you start going to networking events where you have like these big, prominent, maybe business owners in the area, or like no one has it all put together. And I think there's a lot of reassurance in that, especially for people who are trying to navigate that and are a little bit more open about it. So that was very much me, was like never, and I would encourage any like young creative listening to never feel like they're that far behind. And also strike that with the balance of being properly humble, because that's the most important thing. And always having just a learning mindset. But to answer your question, honestly, I was very fortunate because as I'm meeting more people that kind of ask the same thing, or they're at a career inflection point where they want to maybe do their own thing. I don't know, Michael, if I would have had, and I'm fully secure in admitting this, I don't know if I would have had the moxie to do it on my own if I hadn't gone through February 1st of last year, where I was all of a sudden, okay, Andy, your contract is discontinued. We're going a different direction. If I don't know if I would have been able to consciously leave that office and, the security sort of that lifestyle, if it hadn't been like a 360 shift like that. And that's why I resonate so hard and empathize with people, is like, man, like if that hadn't happened to me, like I don't know if I would have ever had the courage to be able to make that leap. So I have a lot more respect and admiration for people who can consciously have take it upon themselves to leave a situation like that. But I promise you, there's very rarely a downside to leaving a very there are obviously downsides, and I'm biased because my experience leaving the whole thing, but there's always going to be an opportunity to come back to the safe side. Whereas I have also met people where they will always wonder what if. And even now, that's become a bigger and more clear motivator for me, as I do this, is like, at the end of the day, I could always be back doing that thing and wondering, because there were so many days even, and I was only at a full-time agency role for a year, Michael, and just doing design. And I was always wondering, and I would talk to, like the way the agency worked is that we would talk to sales and communicate with project managers. And so I had, in that process of getting the brief between sales and the account managers, I would also see like, okay, this is the size of the order that the client's placing for the designs on this apparel. And I would see like, man, like what would it look like if I were the one that was in a higher leverage point to where I was the beneficiary of, all the actions that I'm putting in, because I'm doing a lot of the work here myself and I'm just making, $22 an hour. So that started the gears turning in terms of like, okay, what would this look like if I could actually be the sole beneficiary of all this work I'm putting in? And I think that's a lot of what starts it, especially for younger people, is that there's just so much that they don't know in terms of the process of how business works and how the functions that design serves on that. And they're more focused on, and this is totally fine because there is an element of that to building a career where they're just solely focused on getting to do what they want and making money doing it. And that's the first step. But the biggest circle to square, and the biggest thing that you have to learn over time is like, if you can learn to put yourself into a higher leverage point, which we can all do, and sort of take on more risk, take on more stress and responsibility of, being the one that gets the work, that can scope it out, and being able to implement your key areas of value in all steps and then deliver a good product, then the benefits of that are compounding and you still have access to the parts of it that you initially got into it for, the creative, the design. But it's also very hard because you can lose touch to a lot of those aspects too. And there are people, it kind of all starts with self awareness as well. I know I'm going on another tangent here, but it kind of all starts with self awareness. So if you are someone that enjoys the craft, if you are someone that enjoys just doing the work and you're very satisfied and fulfilled, like it might not be a conversation to have with yourself in terms of having to take on more responsibility. because at the end of the day, we're looking for life fulfillment. Like that's always been my North Star is like, okay, how do I use my scarce resources of life, whether it's time, energy, skill set, and try and create the ultimate end product in terms of happiness with life. And for me, like I said, I over indexed so hard when I first started and I had to get work of marketing myself, being very active on LinkedIn, putting in the time to engage with others and market yourself. That honestly, that part of it was and it was very energizing for me. And there are still times where I do miss the peace of mind of being on the clock and making money hourly. But you start to think like, okay, if that's the hardest part, if that's, if the anxiety that it comes with that is the hardest thing you have to quench down, you have to look at all the positives. So it also takes like looking at what kind of lifestyle you want to build, because that's a very different perspective between agency versus doing your own thing. Obviously, there's a lot. You want to be in a situation you're going to be working a lot more when it's for yourself. But ideally, if you work it out to a place where you're actually enjoying the work, then it's not going to feel nearly as it's not going to feel like work at all, to be honest. And there'll be times where you consciously have to pull yourself away from doing it in order to preserve that balance. Whereas with the agency life, it comes more naturally. So there's a ton of different, I know, sort of going on a tangent, there's a ton of different like positives and negatives to doing both. Just about, it starts with a self awareness of knowing like what fulfillment and happiness looks like for you, and then having the courage and shoving your chips in on what's going to make that thing happen for you.
You've touched on so many things that, I said I wish I could dedicate, 30 minutes to everything that you just said. You talked about risk, which is one thing that I don't think that a lot of people take in consideration when they have, like, their own business. For instance, if there's a typo on something you printed, guess what? You have to reprint that, and that's a
Yep.
cost. And, so there's a lot of risk that goes into that, a lot of people don't see. You talked about, promoting yourself. Not only do you have to do the work, you have to look for other work. You have
Yep.
to bill the work. You have to chase down the bills, look for the next work. So it's a lot more than just doing the work. And I think that that's the one thing that I kind of got lulled into when I was working for someone else, was just doing the work, walking away, trying to build something on my own and hoping that it would become something, but you're right. The pressure of losing your job, you're like, "Oh, now I need to make this a priority because, am I gonna work for someone else? Am I gonna work for myself?" And, one of the jokes was that when I went to the bank once and I was putting in a work check, for work I did, and the teller said, "Oh, like, what do you do?" And I was telling her what I did and everything. She goes, "Oh, that sounds so fun to own your own business." And, to which I said, "Yeah, I pick the 18 hours a day that I work."
Yeah.
It's
Hmm.
and it's 7 days a week. It never stops. So there's that
Yeah.
anxiety as you're always trying to get ahead. How do you do the work? Because I notice that you're very active and still creating stuff for yourself. You talked about that balance. You put out a lot of content, and I'm sure that takes up a lot of time. And, when you get your jobs, does that slow down? Does that speed up? How do you do that? How do you balance that?
Yeah, this is very top of mind because I just had this conversation with a friend literally a couple of days ago. And what you'll find is that you start going to these events, start to talk to other business owners, whether or not they're in creative, whether or not people you meet on LinkedIn or just going to a chamber of commerce about something like that. But a lot of times what you'll see is, and I was very much in this camp at the beginning. Um, and I've put in a couple systems that, I'll talk about. The people that look, and this is why the whole social media thing is a very is something to keep your eye on, because a lot of the times the people that are very consistent with content that you're always seeing looks like they're crushing it, right? A lot of the times those are the people that don't have the work, so they're spending all the time. It's the same with people in creative, like maybe they have a killer portfolio, but then you start to look under the scenes a little bit, like peek behind the curtain, not in a weird way, but you start to realize like, okay, maybe all the clients in this killer portfolio, oh, maybe they're not real, you know? Maybe I mean, there's no testimonials, there's no backing to it. I can't find any visibility of them like off this one platform. Like there's no testimonials, there's no real social proof, there's no substance there. And so the last thing you want to do is become someone that becomes so far on the marketing side of the business that once you get people in, you'll face this problem of like, okay, you actually have to fulfill on this work that you brought in. It may be clear in terms of how I just said that, that I have had experiences with that where you do err too much on one side or the other. And also you say yes to too much when you over index on this side, you start to say yes to too much on the opportunity side and you don't have the systems in place to be able to deliver a good product or up to your standards. And also when you're on too far on the side, your quality drops, because you're not spending time in software learning. This is why you have to be very conscious of, okay, what's the actual needle mover in the business. The biggest part for me, because I am very consistent with content, is that I mean, the short answer is that I've gotten better at making it less of a time investment. So my normal process now is I have a idea capture engine, which is all managed in Notion. This is just for content specifically. In terms of like other forms of marketing, like networking and stuff. I work that into the week, so I try and always go to at least 2 to 3. Before it was one, it was weekend events, it was summits, it was all these things, and I was capturing content from all, and just honestly spreading myself way too thin. And I would honestly say, like, I still over-index a little bit on the content side of my business, but I think that suits my personality well because I wanna work the business into a place where another form of revenue for me is the content itself, whether it's through brand partnerships or through some kind of, user-generated thing with other business, and it's also opened the arm for another service at MMG, which is, like, content fulfillment. So it's a little bit of it is kind of learning on the job because if I, create a piece of content that does very well, part of it is social proof and it's also information that we can take away and use for clients to inform some of their content. And again, like that could just be justifying my habit of, wanting to do the thing that I'm, trying to solve more for. The biggest thing with content is that if you have to have a systemized process and not diluting yourself between a ton of different mediums. So I've been very concentrated, and the thing I'm very grateful for is that I didn't get enamored with hopping around to a bunch of different platforms and trying a lot of different things. I just got consistent with 5 posts a week on LinkedIn, and then doing the outbound behind that to sort of build an audience of people that were in the market for what I do. So that's the big part that people don't think is that you start posting and you dilute yourself onto multiple platforms where, you know, maybe the people that are on those are the people that can, buy your service or in the market or don't have the budget to, work with you. So if people are, especially young creatives, people that are looking to start to market themselves better using social media, the biggest thing is to just stay one platform, one audience. So know the person that you're trying to sell to and know what kind of content speaks with them and run that through, be very consistent with it. For mine, I just set out to do it for 6 months consistently, posting every day and also doing the outbound behind it. So on LinkedIn, that looks like connecting with 30 people a day because that's the limit, and then sending messages to them, and totally conversational messages as well. Like I've never done anything automated. I've never had a sales pitch. You never lead with that. You just start conversations. And always, especially if you're just getting started, always say yes to a meeting. I was sort of like mentoring and coaching like a younger, he's a video editor. I say when it comes to marketing your own stuff, don't view it as you're not selling the edit, you're selling a meeting with yourself, you're selling a relationship and that's how we design our websites too, is that like you have a main objective that you're going for in the end. A lot of the time with a site, it's a call booking or a form submission. So you think, okay, when you're marketing yourself on social platforms, the ideal outcome of doing it right is meetings and relationships. So how do you optimize for those is you make content that starts to expands very top of funnel as it reaches more people. That starts to filter in more people as you build an audience through doing manual connections. And LinkedIn is unique in the sense that it lets you have a say in who your audience is because you can start to network and consciously make connects with people with certain job titles and certain industries. That's why I love LinkedIn so much. a lot of people don't like it because it is a more professional platform. And I think like even now, like it's starting to change more into generally accepted social media. So videos are starting to become a lot more common. And I think a big reason that I saw success, not quickly because I've been doing it for a year, and I put a lot of time into it, but I had experience. In my internship, I had experience with video editing. I used to edit 40 to 45-minute fitness videos. So like short form editing and video came naturally to me. I already had Premiere installed. I knew how to script videos and speak through content and communicate effectively that way. So a lot of my closest relationships and best clients have come from people that have found me through video. And I've had a couple that have gone viral, which I mean, it just reaches a bigger audience. A lot of the times it's very surface level because you're not reaching a lot of the right people. But especially in marketing or design or creativity, it's B2B, you know? So it's a longer sales cycle. You're optimizing for relationships and you don't need a ton of clients and that's the biggest misconception that a lot of people have. So you don't need 50 clients. You need 5 to 10 that are good and and rely on you and you have relationships with them and you preserve those relationships for all their work. So that's really been the value of what social media and marketing myself has been is not you can't go into it with this idea that you're selling yourself or that you're selling the creative or the thing that you fulfill on. You're casting a wider net in terms of visibility and by osmosis, if you have a wider net, a fewer of those people are going to be the ones that you build relationships with, because that wider net was cast in the first place. So you have to go into it with the incentives, like I said, sort of summing that up, is you go into the pure incentives of building relationships rather than selling your product, and then having a very concentrated medium of delivering that message so you don't dilute yourself, and just staying consistent with it because like I even did like a case study, like some of my first posts, Michael, when I first started, 5 to 10 engagements, one engagement. And I was doing the same thing that everyone else did, which was just posting your work, posting, like screenshots and illustrator. This is the project I'm working on, and making it about myself and not about the audience that you're building. But like I said, commit to doing it for a certain duration of time. You're going to learn how to communicate better through content and how to transmit those like comments and surface level conversations sort of off platform and into a longer form dialogue like a coffee or a meeting. And that's where the magic really happens. And even a lot of the times it'll seem like a relationship that's totally unrelated to business, or unrelated to what you do will end up the conversation will always shift that way. So always say yes to the meetings that result out of it, even if they don't seem like they're going to be service and oriented. And I think LinkedIn is uniquely leveraged to be advantageous in that sense. And that's why conversational marketing, as we call it, is so effective because you're on LinkedIn. So it's a business context. And again, it's going to come up naturally in terms of what you do. So that's why conversational marketing works so well. And there's a nice contrast for people and it's going to come up regardless. So you don't have to be salesy. Yeah, that's the biggest thing that's worked for me so far is just like the things about consistency that I said, and then knowing your audience and just committing to getting better at it over time and acknowledging that it's not always going to work right away, but you just have to stay with it over a longer period of time. And I know like I'd be going on tangents with you, Michael. You're easy to talk to. So, but that's the TLDR of everything.
Let me say that your wisdom is beyond your years. And I think that social media in general has really leveled the playing ground for someone like yourself. Now, I've owned my own business since 2007 or 8. Where I literally had my own business where I filed and did all these things under Mondragon Design. I came from a school where it was all about my work. I was just promoting my work, what I did. It was done in a different way back then. Like literally, we would have to have a book where I would have printed items, and sometimes you would FedEx them to a design agency. They would hire you that way. And when you were finally in there, you were actually protected from the client. You never met your clients sometimes. So you just worked and did your work and everything. So when I actually had to interface with clients, it was very, very different because I didn't have the communication skills. I didn't even know how to speak to them, what they were trying to do. So it was a bit clunky. So the fact that you have this skill is only going to serve you great in the future. The fact that you talk to people, you get their wants, their needs, their pain points, what they're trying to do, you're solving their problem. And that's where I feel like it's nobody's fault. It's just the way that it was. But when I had my own business, I had to do all these different things. So it was about the work, right? The quality of work, but it was also kind of massaging the relationship sometimes and kind of, getting people back on track. It's like they would say things about colors or layouts or can we move this? That happens in relationships all the time. So how do you define design success for your clients? Do you have a process?
Yeah. So you'll notice like one of the biggest parts, that's a really good question. Especially when it comes to design, because it's not inherently seen as something that is a revenue generating asset, right? So, like in marketing, just super high level, in marketing, you have things that are more attributable to. So, you have things that drive direct ROI. So, you have like direct response marketing, and you have performance, and that performance marketing falls in that camp. Things where you can directly track conversions that lead to sales and lead to, ongoing client relationships. It's my biggest fascination with this whole thing that I got into, right? Is like a big tagline of our business. Literally, the headline of our website is ROI driven design and marketing strategy. There's a couple tangible ways that you can, demonstrate your ROI. And these come from things like employee retention, customer satisfaction, things that can attribute data to, but then there also has to be an element to the performance marketing side, right? So a lot of your value in it as a creative is going to be tied to not just the visuals, but it's going to be, it's not, or the statistics or the things that it generates on the performance side. A lot of it is going to be if you're working with a founder, if you're working with a business owner, just how much value that delivers to them in terms of their clarity and everything and the messaging that goes into the branding work that you do. So, for instance, if you work with a client to develop a logo for them, always deliver it with some kind of rationale for why the decisions you made tie back to their value proposition, right? The classic example, okay, we chose the color blue because it's a warm color that signifies trust, professionalism. In finance, you choose a certain color green or something that is very tied to professionalism and to financial transactions that build trust with your audience. So having rationales and backing that with industry statistics as to why those are the decisions that you made is one component of it, but also being able to tie to the performance side of it in some way, basing that on customer interactions and thinking like, okay, these are the actions like for us as websites. We install a lot of tracking tags on websites to track user behavior so we can see where people are going on the website if you add a new page. And you can start to tie that back to decisions that are made in discovery. So having some kind of metric of tracking in place. And also when you're doing discovery, knowing kind of like we touched on earlier, is knowing what the ideal outcome is and how the actions that you're doing are generating that. So putting those, being very forward thinking of, okay, how do I track all these things that are going on and attribute success to the inputs that I'm giving this business owner, this founder, this marketing team. And so that when the time comes where you have to display your value, justify the work that you put in, it's going to be a conversation that's a lot less frictionless. And then when they look at, their marketing budget or expenses, it's going to be easy to attribute some of their success or a lot of their success to working with you specifically.
That's incredible, and a lot of young designers actually lean on the aesthetics, like putting, designs together, then trying to justify it. So the fact that you've, you know, nailed that right away, again, is way beyond your years, and that's one thing that I think that clients definitely, well, I'll ask you, they enjoy that, right? And seeing results from their investment.
Right. Well, and that was really kind of you to say, but I'm also very much trying to figure this out too. So I'm by no means removed from it. But the thing that you have to learn too is that you have to speak their language, right? So as um like Michael, all like I had when I first started, I got this branding project for a non-designer. Obviously, like you think like, oh, you work for the non-designer, it's a business owner, obviously. But in this situation, this was a project for me. I was like, oh man, like I was very much trying to get work. This was a project where I was like, okay, I made it. The budget was there. Like I had the time to invest into it. And it was a bigger company. So long story short, it was a branding and logo design project for a female business owner that sold WordPress website templates. So she had like a super boutique brand terminology. And this is like a real life example of me thinking, okay, what did I do wrong? How do I better approach this conversation of ROI and demonstrating my value, and also hand a really big, just like slap in the face in terms of like managing client expectations that I think you're aware, and I know there's a story at some point you can tell that's branching on this because you kind of have to. This was a very, very low point for me. But this is what teaches you. This is what teaches you these things that you have to go through sometimes. So when I look back at that project, for me, it was the biggest things I learned. So you have to speak their language from the beginning and also position yourself to where you're not a task taker designer, to where you're not someone who's just fulfilling on their perception of what they need. Because what you find a lot of times, Michael, is that people have clients, and this isn't no demeaning to them, is they don't know design, you know design. So you have to transmit these jargon, these terms, your process. Knowing your process, by the way, is the biggest needle mover, the biggest thing that justifies your credibility. Knowing your process and being able to explain it just removes all like hands off. Like, okay, this is what you're gonna do. Like, I trust you. This is what I'm getting. This is what I'm paid for, especially in client relationships. If you can do a screen share of, okay, this is what our process looks like without getting too jargony. You want to always find that balance of like not being industry jargon and say like, oh, this is the kerning on this type is, this is why how we go and do this in Illustrator and the vector logos and illustrations and use all the terminology. You're going to fall into that camp of someone who that's all they see you as fulfilling on. Like that's all they're going to come to you for. So if you want to find that balance of being a business partner and quote and speaking their language and being able to bridge that gap between what they care about, like we talked about, what they care about is professionalism. What they care about is looking to competitors like they have their shit together, like they've invested in these things, pardon my lack of professionalism, but that's what they care about. So you have to transmit this jargon, this industry complex language that you and I can talk all day about and do what's important for them. And that's the social awareness aspect of it that we kind of touched on in the beginning is they care about, depending on their industry, say it is a tech company. They care about looking professional and buttoned up to investors. They care about going into conversations with an advantage because they have a really not a well-designed slide deck. They have a really clean logo that speaks to their target audience. It does a lot of the talking for them, and they don't want to have to have the conversation every time they go into a meeting. This is who we are. This is what we do. There's a precedent that's set beforehand because they've invested in design and they've invested in the marketing behind it to get them and get their foot in the door of these opportunities and create their awareness around what they're trying to do, but also just sets them apart from the people that, are their competitors. And that's a big thing too, is that you have to know what's important to them and factor that into your conversations using like for a tactical example is always approaching discussions as their team members. So saying things like, okay, this is where we are reference to, our competitor here. Um, and some of the things they do really well that I think we can take advantages of. So our X, Y, and Z, some of the things that they do really well with their brand, if you look at their social media, is not transmitted very well. So really putting yourself in their position and saying, okay, if if like be objective, like say like, okay, if I was hiring me, what were I want in this thing that I'm trying to build and how can I best fulfill on that? And just be relentless about over delivering for them. And as you start to build a business, as you start to sort of refine your process, see what clients you work better with, a lot of those skills are transmit. in terms of the response that people get from your work. Like if you have a really good client experience, take notes on what they responded really well to. What were the moments where they were like, yes, like that's what I wanted to see. If you have a really good project, take notes of the things that you said that resonated very well and work those into your process moving forwards. But going back to the negative client experience, 'cause I know that's what everyone probably wants to hear. Like I'll tell the story, but it's basically I managed expectations very bad from the beginning. I positioned myself as, okay, this is what we do. The biggest mistake, Michael, never take, no matter how much creative input. I think you should be collaborative with your clients and you should show them a little bit of behind the scenes, make them feel like they're in the groundwork, they're in the trenches with you. Obviously, depending on it's a social recipe. So sometimes they're paying you to solve a problem. Other times they want to go through this process of ideation and discovery, have a bit of more of a handheld experience. I did not judge that well from the beginning. I took this client through very much of the initial stages of exploration and design. And if you show them something that's in those initial stages, a lot of the times it can raise red flags as to whether or not you're on the right track. There was a couple hard conversations and I managed things very poorly, but the biggest lesson for that is that I did not communicate in her language. She wanted someone who said, okay, this is your target customer. This is the branding that we're going to deliver on. And this is why it's going to be effective in growing your business. That's what they want at the end of the day. They don't want someone who's like, oh, well, what do you think of that? They might say, Michael, they might say like, oh yeah, we want some stuff to look at and then we'll be able to make a decision for, you have to say, okay, this is what the solution to your problem is. And then give them maybe a few options in terms of solutions that still solve that same problem rather than saying, okay, boom, here's a chessboard of all these different layouts. And you basically just paid me to go and curate that layout for you. That's not your job. Your job is to solve their problems and do it succinctly and effectively. And then you take that problem off their plate and and then if it's a good experience, you can capitalize on that and then add value in other areas, do brand extensions, do ongoing market. But that's the biggest thing too, is just knowing what's important to them and putting that into a story that solves that problem.
Well, thank you for sharing that because I also want to take some of the pressure off of you. Now, as someone who probably has 3 times experience than you, my career was built on mistakes. And not saying because I did things wrong, that's how I learned. I learned by having clunky conversations, realizing that I didn't have a process, realizing that I need to communicate better, more effectively, and quite frankly, ask more questions at the beginning rather than assuming what my client wants. So a client can come to you and say, "Oh, I need a website." My first answer or response shouldn't be like, "Oh, do you need a word? I do WordPress and we can do all this. We can put all these
Yeah.
pictures in. I'll make it blue and all stuff." It's more like discovery, like, why do you need this? Is something not working for you currently? Are you trying to sell? What are you trying to sell? Have you made these things that you already are going to sell? Like, how are you going to put something up? What's your fulfillment? Is it an e-commerce? Those are questions, a lot of questions up front that aren't asked. So when you have your process and you can do that effectively, you actually ask less questions because you'll have those. They'll tell you them, but you have to unearth it. So be kind to yourself on that. It's going to happen to you in the future. It happened to me this year. It happened to me last year. It's happened to me every year. So it's okay. It's how you build and grow. And you also kind of find your clients within that too. The people that you love to
Yeah.
work with, the people that are easy, the people that want to pay you right away, and the people that want to sit on it for 90 days, those types of
Right.
things. You find out those. So it's okay. And you're also, there's also something out there too, which is, kind of the big elephant in the room, is AI. So 2 years ago, when I started, teaching at a university, I addressed this. And my take on it at the time was when it first came out that it was just a tool. And I still feel that way. I still feel like it's just a tool. Was it a game changer? 100%. It's just like a digital camera. It's just like the iPhone. It's just like all these things that radically changed the industry. how do you use AI in your workflow? And do you feel your clients have a perception of AI and how it works and how maybe it isn't working or it isn't creative? And tell me your take on this as a young person, because I have different takes on it because I've seen this happen so many times.
Yeah. Um, so I use it a lot. I mean, I think we're past the point too where it's become a an automatic assumption that that means that you're not doing any work. I think I'll go into like more nuance in terms of how I use it, but the biggest message, because I'd be going on tangents, but the biggest thing that you have to address with this is when you're communicating to clients, it's then if they're 99% of the time they're totally gonna be fine with it. But the main message that you have to get across, Michael, is that you're using it to benefit their business and not using it to do the work that they're paying you for, right? So that's the biggest misconception of like when creatives or people think when they're like, oh, and that's what the fear mongering is around it, is that if you're using it to help other people and you're using it to accomplish their goals, like kind of talked about the social awareness of knowing what's important to them and using it as a tool to help them, then all you're doing is increasing your own capabilities. And that's the dream, right? So now you get start to think like, okay, like how can I use this to add more value to my clients? And we do that in a lot of ways. So we do that in as early as ideation. So the first time you talk to a client, you should always be recording a meeting. Um, and this is something I had to learn very, very early. Like I was a huge journaler, still am, not as much. So not a huge journaler anymore, I guess. But like I was always be like, okay, taking notes, like, oh yeah, the pull point is right there. So whether it's in person or it's virtual, always record the meeting. And then from there, you can start to expand on their exact needs and questions. The first thing you have to address, though, even if you do record the meeting, you have to know what questions to ask that prompt the responses that are going to set the project, the proposal that you send afterwards, or just the foundation of. You're gonna have to know what sets that up for success. So asking them like the questions you just talked about. What is the business? Who are we trying to reach? What is the ideal target outcome of this project? What would a home run? Something I always ask is, what does a home run collaboration look like to you? What's the biggest problem you're trying to solve? Questions like that. Really start to expand on creative ways to fulfill those using the data that you have, like from those conversations. So record those. The next step for like, so we do websites and strategy. So we use a tool called Reloom.io, which I would encourage everyone to look at. It's totally changed, our process in terms of transmitting the ideation and wireframing phase. It lets us get into the problem solving piece of it much quicker. I mean, that's a tangible tool we use so people can have something a quick win to look at, but I also, I use ChatGPT a lot, which I think everyone should. And we create projects for every one of our clients. So what we can do with that is we can upload a transcript of the conversation, like in our monthly conversations, into the calibration for the project, and it starts to remember. You can have conversations, like different dialogue of conversations based on past data, and you can frame it under one perspective, which is the data from like the first conversation. So you're basically having like an ongoing, obviously not nearly as effective, but you're having an ongoing conversation past just the first touch point. And then in delivery as well. So like with content clients, we're refining this process as I go, but some method of extracting their unique value prop, because that's what's going to stand out in content and creativity and design. They're unique because everyone can post content all day that's like AI swap, right? So you need to really extract what their differentiator is and then use content as a way to highlight that and then use the tools as a way to make that more effective rather than just generating more of what's incorrect in the first place. That makes sense. A lot of it's manual to start with. You have to have these conversations. You have to ask the right questions. But when it comes to the fulfillment and the parts of the process where you don't have to be as creative, you don't have to have the skill set to necessarily go in and implement. Using the speed as the advantage rather than the the originality and the separation. Because, like, by definition, artificial intelligence can't be original. It's always just training on past data. So a lot of it is, you think third principle. How do we extract the unique insights, the differentiators, the what like our end goal, and how do we use AI to put the system with AI in place to be able to fulfill on that single goal and differentiator more effectively, rather than it trying to come up with that thing for yourself. So, like, a lot of times, like I said, it is a manual work up front. And then, like, I'm always learning how to use more tools too. And to be honest with you, like, I feel like I'm way behind as well. I don't think, I think it's not something that anyone should have any anxiety over. I think it's just something that you have to slowly implement, have learning resources in place, follow people that are doing it, and pick up one or two small things as you go. That's really all you can hope to do, because it is moving, very fast. So trying new things too. So another one I started using like a month ago was Notebook LM, which is awesome. Like, I'll load the like client conversations into there, prompt it with your main goals. It has a huge library of storage. So it's the free version. You can upload so many files and calibration data, and just ask it questions. Like, ask it how, like, what tools and software that I can use to add the most value to this client. It'll give you recommendations. And this is more of the strategy principle, because that's a lot of what I'm doing now. I'm not doing as much of the creative fulfillment, but when it comes to like like Adobe's tools and staying up to date on those things, there's always a way that you can just say, okay, this one new thing that I want to learn every week, and set aside time to just literally just explore and fail at using that thing. So I know Adobe rolls out a ton of new creative AI tools. I think they do a very good job of like having tooltips and callouts for when those are implemented in the software. They also do beta rollout programs. So they did one for Premiere Pro recently, which I use to help. That helps a lot too with video editing, because that's something that I do a lot for my own content. I don't do it for our clients, but it is so there's a small tangible tools like that. Another one we use is Adobe's AI enhanced feature for like podcast audio. Like, that's an awesome one. That's saved my ass a lot of times. But then there's just so many other tools. So there's another one that I tried recently. It's called we use Miro, which is like an artboarding tool to do like ideation and research. The Napkin AI is the one I was trying. So I made a presentation for my networking group in Dublin, where you can start to it makes like infographics for you. And those have been really cool too. So I've implemented that in the video. So you can take like a body of text, and it'll generate like a couple different infographics, and a lot of them are just horrible. But a couple of them are like pretty cool. So we start to take that, and I was like, okay, well, maybe I can take that and then I can animate around it for parts of a video, for like a short form video. Adobe Firefly, I have like limited access to that. So I've been using that for some of their new video feature, video generation for B-roll and like 2 clips. And for very quick, basic kind of edits that we do for like short form video, which is a lot of my content. Um, that's a small little thing. Like, that's not obviously, a lot of these things are just small. Like, they're not directly tied to revenue or exponential growth. But I think that's what a lot of it is just slowly picking up these things. And then, like with anything we were talking about in the beginning, is like with content in general, like slowly picking up these things, starting the habit of, okay, like, I want to be someone who is forward thinking and ahead of these things, and just picking up one or two things at a time. And before you realize it, you're like, oh man, like, it's kind of hard to deny that I've implemented at least a little bit into my workflow. I think it just takes the forward thinking to start to implement those things.
Yes, and I agree with you. I ChatGPT is the personal assistant that I've always wanted. It doesn't get tired of me. I can ask it questions all day. It still gives me more. And I also think too, it's asking the right questions. And I think that that is one thing is kind of the intangible part here. It's like I can say like, "Oh, build me a website." But if you were to say to it, "I'm trying to build a website for my client. This is their background. This is what they're trying to achieve." All these different things that you implement into it, they're trying to get this result out of it. What is the best thing? So it's asking uh, the bigger question for your clients. I think that that's very important. Do you use other programs? Like I love all the Adobe software. I'm a Adobe community expert. So I get in all the Premiere thing that you were talking about is great, where you can actually, build in 3 seconds on each side of a video that, that doesn't exist is like amazing to me. It's
Yeah.
definitely that you can see the future of this coming. Do you use other platforms like Dolly or Midjourney? I use Midjourney all the time. So it's like I really want to learn these programs, not only to know what the future is like, but also teach people like yourself, like how to really use the past and other design elements and practices and how to really make this even more robust.
Yeah. So there are those are really good ones too. I don't use sorry, Midjourney very much. I haven't dove into that. And I think like for it's like you have to like part of it is too is like the social awareness of knowing what tools are going to benefit your clients the most and then making that your priority. So like web flows, a lot of it is knowing what tools you're already using and knowing how to get the most out of them, and if there's competitive tools, like not being afraid to make a switch either. If one is innovating more than the other and one can have more value. So Webflow has a couple AI features that we do use. So one of them is like alt text naming. So it can take all the images on the site and automatically add alt text, which has been really nice. Another way to do so we will use like AI imagery generated for wireframe concepts. It's a big red flag to have them kind of on the main product because every time I don't think it's at a point yet where it's 100% perfect. And that's like especially like on a published site, you want to avoid all sense of doubt. But especially I think for shorter term, lower touch content like social media, that's where it starts to have a higher value point because it's less of a downside to where if like it's something is obviously AI generated in terms of a creative asset, there's a lot less chance. It's a lot less likely it's either gonna have a it's gonna make a huge difference. Other tools, trying to think. I think every tool has some kind of, and that's how the market is. They have some kind of AI feature within them. But tools that are uniquely AI, we use Claude for website copy and writing because it is a lot better of a writer. I feel like than, and that's what everyone says. Than
Mhm.
ChatGPT is a lot more creative. There's HubSpot has a couple really cool like ranking software, so you can start to see like how your content is ranking in LLMs based on like word associations and where you're showing up. And like a quick dirty little hack for people: if you want your business or your name, or just if you have an LLC, which I recommend all creatives have if you're doing it for clients, to show up in ChatGPTs, you have to register y- you have to register your business with being webmaster. So it's like the Google equivalent of a Google business profile because ChatGPT pulls a lot more from Bing than it does from Google search. Which is something I learned from Sam Sarkston on LinkedIn recently. He's in the rabbit hole of that stuff with local SEO. Yeah, I think those are a couple of the more tangible ones we use personally in the business. And there will be more and more as they go. And that's sort of one of the habits that you have to embody too is being open to trying them and not saying like, oh, like like I can't, I don't want to change this. This is a thing with habit change as well, is that it takes conscious effort to override your defaults, right? Because we all have our creative process, and we're like, I don't want to change that, or oh, I don't want to add on this thing or go through the friction of trying to do it differently for the sake of an ongoing value add. And that's something that mindset is something that I'm always fighting, Michael. Whether it's a big thing I'm trying to do right now is create SOPs. So like using Tela or Loom to record a task and put it in like Notion for, oh, that's another good one too. Notion, they have an AI writing feature. And they help create better databases as well. It makes it a lot easier. Moxie is another really good one. So Moxie is my freelancing accounting and client management software. That's been pretty cool. They have this thing called Project Assistant where you can prompt like the details of say a website. We have templates for it set up now, but you can prompt like the details of the project, like deliverables, timeline, budget, scope, main contact, like meeting times, everything like that. Put it into a prompt and it'll generate a pretty good outline of like what the project looks like. So create tasks for everything and then set dates to it that'll remind you of it, and you have to go in and refine everything. But that's a really cool use case. It used to take a lot of manual time of thinking like, okay, this is when the project starts, this is when it ends. I have to account that for a calendar, and then okay, I have to make the invoices that go out on those dates, and so that helps a lot. Templatizing a lot too is what I'm trying to get better at, but again, that friction of trying to learn new things and change your process is, I think, the differentiator between people that become just task takers and don't grow and fulfill all of their goals versus the people that can really add more value and build a business and life for themselves that, is really exceptional. And that's what I'm trying to, that's the part of myself I'm always trying to improve on.
No, those are some great tips. The big one is like a game changer, right? And it's funny that you say that because I listen to Gary Vaynerchuk a lot, and he was talking about like Google AdWords, like that's going away. Like people are not going to do searches on Google for different things. They're actually going to ask like ChatGPT or these other things like how to do things. So it's not just getting a result and then calling through, things but it's gonna go directly to the answer. So I was always wondering about that. Like, where does it source that from? So if it says, what's the best graphic designers in your area? Like, how do you get within that network or that directory?
Yeah.
So that's a fantastic tip. And I think that you also nailed it as well. It's a lot of these purposes of AI is to kind of eliminate repeatable tasks. So it's like, or not eliminate them, but actually make them easier. Like you said, templatizing, making these different things. You don't have to make something at the beginning all the time. My goal at the beginning of this when I first heard about it, and I said like, oh, it would be really great if I just like punched it in and it gave me 100 backgrounds for my posters that I want to make. Like I just want a variety. And I'm like, oh, that's a cool one. That's a cool one.
Mhm.
It's kind of what I'm doing with stock photography. I'm looking through a whole bunch of stuff, takes me hours, or looking for fonts, the perfect font for the perfect project. It's like, what are these things that I can take that time out instead of spending hours on it, I can spend a few minutes on it. So that's where I kind of see this going as a creative. No one sees that. My clients don't see that, but they expect the result, right? So I think that that's
Right.
also the thing. It's not taking the creativity out. It's taking out my process of like, because I'll obsess on it. I'll take way too long on these things and trying to find the perfect one. So do you find yourself in that same kind of mental rabbit hole, as it were?
Oh yeah. Like we all this is why it's and you learn these things as you go, right? So it's a lot of it is just thinking, I think trying to have the mindset of a lean process. A book recommendation I can make here too is called Lean Marketing by Alan Dibb. And it's based on the principle of like lean manufacturing, right? And I'm kind of kind of obsessed with this principle is like how can I make anything in the business and life in general, like the bare essentials and improve on those so I have fewer levers to pull. Whether it's in your own process or it's, like how you design your life, like commute to the gym or like having food on hand. Like what's the leanest principle that I can live on to get the best result possible? And that's what creates leverage. So when it comes to AI tools, like we were saying, knowing what I think having the foundational tools that you talked about that you can rely on repeatedly, in combination with the conscious learning of, being aware of the new ones and also improving your skill set within the ones that you honed in expertise on. So it's kind of like that T level concept that can apply everywhere. So I think it applies to creative careers as well as, just becoming better at what you do is having like a T-shaped approach. So you are proficient to knowledgeable in a wide area, and then you go very deep on one area. I think it's a good approach to have, with learning AI as well. And investing like the stick of that T into, I think, a base tool like ChatGPT or Claude that has a very wide functionality that can have kind of compounding benefits in different areas. And then having a base level and the other areas that it can add value to your clients. It's kind of a good mindset to go into it with.
So Andy, I've seen so much growth in you since the last time that we talked. Where do you go a year from now? And where do you go 5 years from now? Where do you want to be in the future, not only with yourself, but also with your design agency.
Yeah. First of all, thank you. I mean, I've seen a lot of. I mean, I know like I'm the junior in the conversation, but I've seen a lot of growth in you as well. And like transparently, the reason we got in touch at the first point was because I did see you as a role model. So um, it's well pretty full circle to hear you say that actually. So and 1 to 5, you're like I'm a big believer that you focus on just day to day and get better at what you do. I'm more valued at people that have already raised their hands to you. But ideally, where I'd like to be in 1 to 5 years, I think you have to know what success looks like in order to set the winds that steer the ship towards those shores. That was actually kind of a cool. I just came up with that on the spot. That was kind of cool. But anyway, so what I think that looks like is for me is having a small team. So right now, this is like where the whole SOP conversation is going. Is trying to build more of a business and less of a freelance career. So the next step would be hiring. Would be outsourcing work, getting more comfortable with doing that, whether it looks like people in person or having, like I call a borderless agency where you have more specialized roles that can fulfill in development, design, and then I have a bit more leverage to be able to pick what parts of it that I can spend more time on, and do more higher level thinking, whether it's in the systems building, whether it's managing the finances and stuff like that, having more sales conversations and focus and be more justified and focusing on the marketing part. Because that is what I enjoy. I do love the content part of it. I do love the podcast, and I want to get better at honing those things more in on to where they are more closely tied to the revenue parts of generating leads for MMG, and either the guests or the content that we make is having inbound conversations with people that can be clients. But it all comes back to the same principle, just adding relentless value, adding more to the people that can work with you. So for us, that's B2B companies and people with and B2B marketing teams. Those have been our best clients so far. And as and I'm new to I've only been in business for 2 years, so also being open to pivots and changes. But I know right now that what gets me up in the morning and where feel most creatively fulfilled and like I'm fulfilling a purpose is when I deliver for clients under that umbrella, and also when I can have some time to create for myself as well. So it's really about the alignment of those two things, and hopefully in 1 to 5 years, I'm doing the same thing but better.
Fantastic answer. And I appreciate you saying that you looked up to me. I'm pretty modest when it comes to those types of compliments, only because I feel that I haven't been putting myself out there enough. And the fact that you saw what I was doing, and at the time I was doing it was I was it was focused on putting my expertise out there. And I'd like to make a deal with you if I could.
Sure.
Since this is the first podcast, and you're my first podcast guest on this format, will you be my 52nd podcast guest? The reason I say that is I will have done a full year of podcast. So I have 50 more to go before you're on the show again. So the reason I say that is because I have, in a sense, been hiding, and that's a reveal. I've been hiding a little bit. I haven't been a true artist either. I've been trying to figure this out so much that I kind of got lost in the process. And these types of things help me. When you talk, you get me excited. When you put stuff out, it shows me that this is the way that I should be doing these types of things. And because I'm more modest and I don't put myself out there, I realized the hard way that people don't know what I do, what I can do. Only selective people that I've let in on that have known. My good friends that I've known since high school never have seen me or my work, and I can't believe that I have all humility. I don't know how that happened, but I guess that's one of the things. It's much more acceptable now online to show your work, show your process, show how these things are made, and people are fascinated by it. I didn't realize that that was a superpower. I didn't realize that people wanted to see it. They just wanted, I always thought that they wanted to see the end result. So you have inspired me just by your content, just by your tenacity. And quite frankly, you have something that I had back then that I wish I had now, was being naive, not knowing the answers to things. I feel like I have to come in with an answer now. So the fact that you're naive and doing it is super inspiring. So I wanted to let you know that.
Thank you. And that is for certain. Definitely the naive part. Like I said, we all don't know what we don't know. And like I said, when we have our 52nd podcast, we'll be like, man, who the hell were those idiots back on Tuesday, March 11th, 2025? But that's the perspective we all live for. Hindsight's 2020. And I now have something to look forward to next March that I didn't even know that I didn't have walking into this. So I love that, Michael. And yeah, it's anything that keeps us in touch on that front. And it's everything you just said means a lot. So I thank you a lot and for having me today. Like, this has been definitely the highlight of my day. Not saying a lot there, because today's not been ideal, but I mean, you've been like, every time I always associate, seeing you and seeing our conversations as a bright spot in my day. So thank you very
Well,
much.
I appreciate that. And as someone in fitness, if you don't have a goal, then you can't get to it, right? And then you have to have motivation. I still feel like I have 30 more years of a career, and it's the only thing I do and the only thing I do well. And now I need to show people. I've done things that I haven't even shown people, and it's like insane that they don't know that. So I'd love to take this journey with you, and I will see you here in a year. What do you think about that?
Let's do it, Michael. It's on the calendar.
Fantastic. Tell us where we can find you and where we can get in contact with you on socials.
Yeah, absolutely. Head over to LinkedIn, Andy Milligan. Follow my company page too, MMG Design. Our website is mmgdesign.net, and we have the weekly podcast called Marketing by Design. It was recently sponsored by our local American Marketing Association chapter. So if you are curious about all the things we talked about in terms of how to add more marketing value to clients, to design, and just to your life as a whole, then that's where you should find us.
Fantastic. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in a year.
Yes, you will. Probably sooner than that, but that's
Hopefully,
yeah.
hopefully, if I can do the put in the reps, it might be sooner. Thank you, Andy.